Hello students, welcome to the Analyst dated 13th of October 2023. Today we look at 5 important articles from the Indian Express and the Hindu. The first article will be regarding the giant ozone hole. Then we look at money bill. Then we'll understand the tea industry. Then we'll take a look at the global hunger report. And finally, we'll take a look at the index of industrial production or IIP. Now let's start with the first article, and this pertains to the giant ozone hole, and this is GS3, part of your environment and disaster management. Now let's understand that the atmosphere is a spherical layer of gases. So these are layers of gases all around the earth, right? And they are named differently. For example, your troposphere, your stratosphere, mesosphere, thermosphere, and exosphere. Now, the majority of the climatic events, they are taking place, 99% of the climate events, they take place in the troposphere. But why stratosphere becomes important is because of two phenomena. One is the temperature inversion. Why? Because it has something called as the ozone layer, which absorbs a lot of heat, which is because of absorption of the harmful UV rays from the sun. That simply means that when we are talking about the stratosphere and in turn the ozonosphere, it is extremely important for sustaining life on Earth. And in this context, a giant ozone hole have been found on Antarctica, which is thrice the size of Brazil, and that is why it becomes extremely important. Now, ozone is O3, that means 3 molecules of oxygen, but this is extremely unstable. So what is stable? Stable is oxygen. Now, we can find this ozone, the O3 molecule, in two places. One is at the surface and at the ozonosphere. That means we can find ozone in both stratosphere and troposphere. So if I can say that ozone is found on stratosphere, then it is good ozone. And if it is found on troposphere, then it is bad ozone. And what is ozone? Ozone is O3. Why bad ozone? Because here, if it is at the bottommost layer of atmosphere, it is considered as a pollutant, which is responsible for something called as the photochemical smog, which affects our day-to-day life, and it is a pollutant. So air pollution in troposphere caused by ozone. On the other hand, when present at the stratospheric level, it is life-saving and therefore good ozone. Why? Because it defends us from the ultraviolet rays. Now, let's understand what is ozone depleting substance. So, molecules like CCl4, carbon tetrachloride, chlorofluorocarbons, HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, they have something called as they can give us a radical bromine, iodine, and these chlorine, bromine, iodine radicals, they can directly attack the O3 molecule. Let's look at how. So let's say under any circumstance, if we have CCl4, under any circumstance, if I am able to break one of the chlorine atoms from this CCl4. Then it becomes a chlorine radical. It becomes unstable. And what did we have? We had O3, which is again unstable. Now, if they react, it can happen that O2 plus ClO can be created, which brings oxygen. Now, if such molecules, they start giving us chlorine, bromine, iodine, all these halogens, then what happens? It can directly attack the O3 molecule that is present in the stratosphere. That means if I am adding any pollutant which can give me these free radicals which can attack the ozone, then that substance will be called as ozone depleting substance or ODS. Simultaneously, and this is the reaction for you if you want to jot it down. Now, simultaneously, we have something called as the polar stratospheric clouds. This is something that enables more ozone depletion. So, by the name itself, it is visible that when we are saying polar, then they are mostly present under Antarctica or South Pole. Then, if I am saying stratospheric, that means they are of higher extent, vertical extent. Now, what happens is, let's say, this is our troposphere. And beyond the troposphere, let's say a cloud penetrates. That means it is going to stratosphere. Now, a polar stratospheric cloud will enable more ozone depletion when? During winters. So it will penetrate above the troposphere, it will go into stratosphere, and due to its height, it will have a lot of ice crystals. These ice crystals and the overall condition will enable the breaking of, let's say, CCl4 into CCl3 plus chlorine radical. And this free chlorine radical will then attack the O3 molecule. So, during winters on Antarctica, the clouds increase in their vertical extent, and these clouds are called the polar stratospheric clouds. And because there is presence of ice crystals in them, these ice crystals, they enable the breaking up of halogens, the breaking up of HCFCs, CFCs, carbon tetrachloride, halogens, and eventually this leads to creation of free radicals which are unstable, and then they attack another unstable molecule which is the O3 to break it into O2 and a ClO or ClO2, whatever the valency is. Now, over the period of time, these two factors have created the ozone hole, and therefore there must be some understanding of this hole. What do we mean by this hole? So this hole, it is not permanent. That means it is also a cyclical process. At times the ozone hole increases in size. Let's say it is winter, and during winter there is polar stratospheric cloud. Then naturally the size of the ozone hole will increase. Then in summer it will squeeze. Then what do we see? That this ozone hole is more prevalent in Antarctica rather than Arctic. That means it is more prevalent at the South Pole rather than the North Pole. But technically this is not a hole. This is an area where the density of ozone is below 200 Dobson units. And because of the catalyst effect of polar stratospheric clouds as well as presence of pollutants like CFC, HFCs, they can be intensified. So, what will be the impact? The impact is very simple. If you have high energy coming from sun, and if you don't block it, if you are not able to block it, then what happens? You will have skin cancer, cataracts, impaired immune systems, and harms to crop and marine phytoplankton. That means, can I say it affects life of humans and life of the entire biosphere, and therefore it will directly affect the livelihood also in terms of our food security, in terms of the balance of the ecosystem that will be affected. Why? Because these harmful rays will be coming and they will be incipient on the earth. Now, what are we doing to mitigate it? So, firstly, we went for a Vienna Convention in 1985. Under the Vienna Convention, we went for a Montreal. Montreal is in Canada. So, these questions can also come up in your prelim questions, like they can become a good option. Montreal Protocol, Vienna Convention. So, Vienna Convention in 85, then Montreal Protocol, then a Kigali Amendment. This Kigali Amendment was done. Why? Because Montreal Protocol, it restricted the use of CFC. And these CFCs are used where? ACs, fridge, aerosol sprays, everywhere. So, we phased out CFCs, but we started using HCFCs. But later on, it was found out that they are also dangerous. So now there will be phasing out of HFCs and CFCs. And this is the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment for you. And this is part of the mitigation. Now simultaneously, can I say all the solutions that we discuss in terms of mitigation strategies for pollution will also be valid? For example, if we are going for energy transition, whether we are using electric vehicles, whether we are using solar energy, whether we are using wind energy, whether we are moving towards hydrogen economy, and that too green hydrogen economy, whether we are going for the FAME scheme or we are going for the BS6 engines, we are going for E20 ethanol, blending of 20% fuel. So all these pollution control strategies along with the global cooperation will be the mitigation strategy for looking at ozone hole. Let's look at the money bill case. Now here a 7-judge bench will take a call on giving priority to the money bill case, and that is why it is extremely important to understand what is this money bill case and what do we mean by money bill. Now what do we see as a part of a legislative strategy? We have seen that two routes, one is the ordinance route and the other is the money bill route. These two routes are used to go for legislations. Under what circumstances? Whenever the government feels that there is some difficulty in, let's say, getting the bill passed in the ordinary fashion. Now, one thing is that an act or a law is meant for, and the other thing is how it is used. So, whenever we are talking about the legislative strategy, it is essentially about the idea of misuse of ordinance route as well as the money bill route. Now, why this becomes extremely pertinent? Because significant legislations were passed through the money bill route. And what happens when we have a money bill is that the Rajya Sabha, the power of the Rajya Sabha is extremely curtailed. On the other hand, the Lok Sabha can go on to pass their legislation. And that is why if a bill is classified as a money bill, it will restrict the scrutiny of the Rajya Sabha. And if the Rajya Sabha is unfavorable at a particular point of time due to political reasons, then this strategy is used, and many a times it is thereby challenged as an abuse of constitutional powers before the court. And therefore, a 7-judge bench is sitting on this case. Now, let's look at the timelines. So, the Supreme Court will look at categorization of bill. So, I can either come as an ordinary route or I can make a bill a money bill by getting the approval from the speaker and only presenting the bill before the Lok Sabha, and thereby whatever is the interior constituent of the bill will be bypassing the Raj Sabha, and whatever Raj Sabha says will be irrelevant. Even if it gives an advice in 14 days, then also I can bypass it. If it doesn't give me any advice in 14 days, then also I can go ahead. That means the Raj Sabha virtually is bypassed in a money bill, and that is why it becomes a contentious issue. Now, what are the significant legislations? So, the Aadhaar Act was coming through the money bill route. Then we had the amendments to PMLA and increasing the powers of ED, again money bill route. Then multiple tribunals were merged and many tribunals were completely removed, and this was again challenged. And this, the Aadhaar Act, the Money Laundering Act, all of that were passed, but the tribunal reforms, they were stuck. Why? Because on the grounds of constitutionality, and that is why these cases will be heard in the money bill case. Now let's understand money bill. So why I am giving this extraordinary power of Article 110. So Article 110 talks about the money bill, and Article 1101 tells me the various grounds on which I can go for a money bill. Essentially, they will restrict to taxation, receipt, government borrowing, and use of consolidated and contingency fund of India. Now, 1101 A to F will give me these grounds of where I can use, and then 110 G will tell me any matter which is incidental. That means, let's say I am here drawing a core area on which any law, if made, there will be money bill. But what I am saying in 1101G is that any matter which is incidental to will also be classified as a money bill. And who classifies the money bill? So it is the speaker. And if we have a simple majority in the house, usually what happens, the speaker is from the government, from the party of the government itself. So usually there will be allegations about the neutrality of the speaker, or to say so, that whether or not the speaker has applied the mind while classifying a bill as a money bill or not. And if at all there is non-application of mind, can I say that this will be subject to judicial review? So that is the moot question, that can the judiciary say on a case-to-case basis that in this particular case, this law is a money bill, this particular bill is a money bill or not? Can I say if the Supreme Court dwells too much into whether or not a bill is a money bill or it is not a money bill, then what will happen? Can I say there will be allegations, or it can be seen as against the fundamentals of separation of power? Right? And can I say that if this happens, then the judiciary will involve itself in judicial legislation? And can I also say it will violate the Salisbury Doctrine, where the government should have the due power to fulfill its promises? Promises to whom? Promises to the electorate. So can the Supreme Court on a case-to-case basis tell whether the speaker is doing a good job or a bad job, whether the speaker is applying the mind or not? And therefore it becomes extremely contentious. It also will violate any form of parliamentary sovereignty, or can I use the word parliamentary independence? And this parliamentary sovereignty or independence, this is not extraordinary. The way we would like to have judicial independence, similarly, we would like to have parliamentary independence in its own domain, in its own sphere of competence, and there must be a balance between the doctrine of separation of power and the doctrine of checks and balance. So checks and balance in form of judicial review is must, but can the Supreme Court go on a case-to-case basis to say whether the speaker is doing a good job or not? And that is the moot consideration here. Now, what happens when a money bill is classified? It will directly go to Lok Sabha and it will be admitted in Lok Sabha. Then it will go to Raj Sabha. Raj Sabha says okay. Then also it becomes a bill. If Raj Sabha gives no reply or disagrees within 14 days still. So under any circumstance, it becomes a bill. Now, let's look at the judicial review. So the contentious matter is under 1103. Here it says that the wisdom, that the decision of the speaker will be final. But what we have seen, whenever in constitution any such word is written, then usually the judiciary will say subject to judicial review, and that has happened. Let's see how. So the Aadhaar bill of 2016, it went to Rajya Sabha also, and Rajya Sabha made some recommendations which were rejected. Later on, it was mooted that this is not a finance, this is not a money bill. But the court gave a decision that it is a money bill, except that there was some dissent. Dissent in form of the dissenting opinion of Justice Chandrachud in case Puttaswamy versus Union of India, where he said that this entire bill was about identity. So even though the bill was held to be constitutional except for few sections, but the moot idea of the bill being tagged as a money bill was contested by a dissenting opinion. What do I mean by dissenting opinion? So let's say there is a 5-judge bench, 4 judges, they say that it is absolutely constitutional, but one judge, that is our Justice Chandrachud, he gave a dissenting opinion that this bill is about identity. And it is important for Rajya Sabha to keep a check on the arbitrary exercise of powers of the lower house, which is the Lok Sabha. Now, then what happened? There was amendment through the finance bill of 2017 where several statutes were amended and there were merger or integration of tribunals. Now, what do we know about tribunals? Tribunals are essentially quasi-judicial bodies. If I have quasi-judicial bodies, that means there is some form of judicial independence attached to it. And if at all the executive action would violate that judicial independence, then naturally the court will rein in the executive or the legislature. Why? Because judicial independence is part of the basic structure doctrine. And so in Roger Matthews versus South Indian Bank, it was seen that whether the finance bill was in accordance with Article 110, that is a money bill, or not. Then the court held that the existing precedents did not provide clarity. That means we do not have any precedent as such that the classification of money bill by speaker is right or not. So there is no clarity and therefore it was referred to a larger bench. However, the court also simultaneously mentioned that the court noted that the power of judicial review of speaker's decision should be exercised restrictively. That means the powers that is vested with the judiciary under judicial review should not be used frequently. It should be used sparingly. Why? Because of the wisdom of separation of powers. That is an absolute need. Because if this happens, then all the institutions of the state, if they start interfering in the core domains of each other, then what happens? Then there will be chaos. And we must appreciate that each wing is an expert in their own domain. So we must appreciate the wisdom of the other institution as well. Let's look at the tea industry, and this pertains to your GS3, agriculture and industry. And this is in news because of the tea industry is facing an acute financial crisis. Now let's understand where can we cultivate tea. So in India, some parts in Kangra Valley, which is not very successful. Then in the regions of Duars, the Bengal Duars, we can have them, and the fertile plains down south slope of the Himalayas. So we will have some regions in Assam and in North Bengal, that is Kalimpong or Darjeeling. Then we will have the regions of Nilgiris also, which will be vying in three states, that is Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala. So these are the major tea producing regions of India. Now the origins are contested and there is evidence that it was started in China, but the region is nearby northeast India and northern Myanmar. So that is the origin of teas in terms of cultivation. Now it is a tropical and subtropical plant which requires some amount of slope. Slope is beneficial. Then good drainage. Water should not clog, water should not stop, it should flow properly. So good drainage in soil. Then mild cold conditions can be sustained, but extreme cold conditions cannot be sustained. But it requires good moisture. So it can handle rains from 150 centimeters to 300 centimeters. And we need tropical to subtropical heat. That means ideal temperature is 20 to 30 degree Celsius. And if we have mildly acidic soil, then it is good for the crop. And sun is also must. So gloomy weather is not good for tea. Having said that, let's look at the industry. So India is the second largest producer of tea and the fourth largest exporter of tea. And nearby we must appreciate that Sri Lanka is a very big exporter of tea along with China, India. So they are also good exporters of tea. So whenever there is any economic crisis in Sri Lanka, then our tea industry gets better opportunity. Why? Because there is severe competition between the tea industry of Sri Lanka and India. Then we are consuming more than 80% of tea in India itself. Why? Because it is a daily beverage and it is a habit forming beverage. Then we are exporting 10% of the production. And what are the regions? So typically Middle East, the Americas and Western Europe along with Russia. These are the regions. And we account for 10% of the global exports, and which is now vying towards $700 million. And Indian tea is a famous based upon its unique geographical location. So Darjeeling tea will be unique and will be different from the tea that we get from Nilgiris. Furthermore, the use of geographical indicator, and we must appreciate that the Darjeeling tea is the first geographical indicator of India and it is renowned across the world. And the black tea is comprising of 96% of India's exports, and rest is the regular tea and the green tea. The Tea Board of India is under the Ministry of Commerce, and this is responsible for promotion of tea growers and tea estates and for promotion of more trade and naturally exports. Its headquarter is in Kolkata and it has offices also in Dubai and Moscow. Now this becomes important. Why? This can become a prelim pointer. Now, how can we go about the development of this industry? So, the Minister of Commerce was talking about the growth of industry and he gave the idea of one district of one product and adoption of aroma for tea, where he was talking about the assistance to small growers. Why? Because the financial capital and the financial capacity of the big estates is huge. Why? Because parallelly we are seeing that there is Tata, there is Hindustan Unilever, and big companies which are in the tea market. On the other hand, there are small growers also, and they are mostly facing the financial crisis. So then re-energize the high value markets, targeting newer high value markets of Middle East and America. Then going for organic to promote more organic and GI tagged teas. Then modernization of local supply chain while also adapting to changing demands of sustainability in the light of climate change. Let's look at the global hunger index. Now India sadly has got a 111 rank out of 125 countries in the hunger index. Now this is a sad reality either of India or the index itself, and that is why the government has called it erroneous and done with a malafide intent. Over the period of time, what we are seeing is that while our economic size is continuously growing and our poverty alleviation measures, they are doing tremendously well, but what are we seeing? We are looking at decreasing rank in terms of global hunger index, which was 93 in 2015, and today in 2023 we are at 111 rank. So even though we have become the fifth largest economy of the world. Now why is that so? Because it has been compiled by the Irish NGO Concerned Worldwide and Welt Hunger Hilfe. Now the issue is that these are institutions which are West dominated, and naturally there comes a bias. Simultaneously, the idea of data, how the data is being pooled, and what kind of parameters is being used. So what are the parameters of calculation? So the scale is simple. The scale is 100 scale. If you get 0, you are the best. If you get 100, you are the worst. And it is based upon 4 parameters. 4 parameters. One is inadequate food supply. So let's say we are getting some food from PDS shops. So how effective the food supply or the supply chain in the entire country is. Now this is calculated by taking a poll from 3,000 people. By taking opinion from 3,000 people. That is the sample size. Then there is under 5 mortality rate, U5MR. Then there is child stunting. Then there is wasting. Whenever we are talking about stunting, what do we mean? We mean lower height. Wasting, W for wasting, W for weight, lower weight. For their height, and child stunting is low height for their age. Then U5MR is under 5. That means before the age of 5, the mortality rate in children in 1000 live birth. So based upon these 4 parameters, this global hunger index is calculated. And what are the issues in the index? Is that it is an erroneous measure of hunger. So rather than working on the qualitative or the quantitative aspects of hunger or food supply, they are essentially looking at issues which are pertaining to children, which will be a different aspect. So whenever we are talking about hunger, we must include all sections of the society, not only stunting wasting of children. Then 3 out of 4 indicators used for calculation of the index are related to health of children. So it should ideally be called global child index, and it cannot be representative of the entire population. Then the proportion of 3000 people is extremely erroneous, and over the period of time it is surprising to see that if the economy size is increasing, simultaneously the per capita income is increasing, and simultaneously if the allocation towards the direct benefit transfer of subsidies is increasing, not only at the central level but all across the states, there is more and more direct delivery of or targeted delivery of services through the Aadhaar ecosystem, then it is surprising to see that India is doing tremendously poorly in terms of the hunger index, and that is why it has been challenged by the government. Let's look at the index of industrial production. Why? Because it has gone to a 14-month high of 10.3%, and this pertains to your GS3 economics. Now it is compiled by the National Statistical Office, which is under MOSPI, that is the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. They can become very good prelim pointers. They can become individual options in your prelims. Now, IIP will track the growth of industrial development in 2 methods, 2 categories. A is the broad sector, then use-based sector. So under broad sector, they will go for mining, manufacturing and electricity, where the weightage of manufacturing is more than 75%. 75% is manufacturing. Then we have 14% in mining, and the rest 8% in electricity. The other method is use based, that is basic goods, capital goods, intermediate goods, etc. Now there is also something called as the 8 core sectors. 8 core sectors is approximately 40% of the index of industrial production, and we must remember this sequence. In this sequence their weightage is allocated. So refinery products, then electricities, and these are 8 core sectors. These 8 core sectors comprise of 40%. So refinery, electricity, steel, coal, crude, natural gas, cement, fertilizer. Looking at them, you can also tell that these are essentially the part of the old industrial setup. That means they form the large integrated steel plants, the large mining operations, which support the building of other smaller ancillary industries or higher order industries. But the old industrial setup of coal, iron ore, natural gas, they support all the other industries. Then in August, there was 10.3% increase, which was boosted by manufacturing, which is extremely broad based. So broad based manufacturing growth, because there is also the upcoming festive season, and then there is a robust and resilient demand from domestic as well as foreign, the export demand, and this broad based development is also due to the government spending, which is continuous in terms of infrastructure spending. Then the rainfall deficiency, it triggered the mining sector. Why? Because whenever there is a rain, too much rain, so mining, you cannot go for mining, especially the open cast mines. Then the irregular rainfall triggered the use of more air conditions and therefore high power demand. So this was the backdrop of the increase of the index of industrial production in August for 10.3%. And 2 important pointers that we understood is the 8 core sectors and the allocation of each sector in terms of the IIP, which is calculated by NSO under MOSPI. Thank you so much. I hope it helped.